इमां शृणु
बुद्धिया युक्तो यया पार्थ
बुद्धिया युक्तो या पार्थ
कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
एषा ते विहिता साङ्ख्ये
एषा ते विहिता सांख्ये
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वयिमां शृणु
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वमिमं शृणु
बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ
बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ
कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
एषा ते विहिता साङ्ख्ये
एषा ते विहिता सांख्ये
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वयिमां शृणु
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वमिमं शृणु
बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ
बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ
कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
एषा ते विहिता सांख्ये
एषा ते
विहिता सांख्ये
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वइमां शृणु
बुद्धिर्योगे
त्वमिमं शृणु
बुद्धया युक्तो यया पार्थ
बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
एषा ता विहिता सांख्ये
एषा ते
विहिता सांख्ये
बुद्धियोगा त्वमिमं शृणु
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वमिमं शृणु
बुद्धया युक्तो यया पार्थ
बुद्धया युक्तो यया पार्थ
कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
एषा ते अभिहीयता
एषा ते विहिता सांख्ये
बुद्धिर्योगे तिमां शृणु
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वमिमं शृणु
बुद्धा युक्तो जया पार्थ
बुद्धया युक्तो यया पार्थ
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
एषा ते विहिता साङ्ख्ये
एषा ते
एषा ते
सांख्ये
बुद्धिर्योगे त्वमिमां शृणु
बुद्धिर्योगे
त्वमिमां
त्वमिमं शृणु
बुद्ध्या युक्तो यया पार्थ
बुद्ध्या
बुद्धिया युक्तो यया पार्थ
कर्मबन्धं प्रहास्यसि
कर्मबन्धं प्रहस्यसि
Synonyms: Esha,
एषा
एषा
all this,
all this
te,
ते
unto you,
unto
unto
you
you
abhihita,
abhihita
abhihita
described,
described
sankhye,
साङ्ख्ये
in analytical study,
in
in analytical study
buddhi,
buddhi
intelligence,
intelligence
yoge,
yoge
in work without fruitive result,
in work without fruitive results
tu,
to
but,
but
imam,
imam
this,
this
shanu,
shrinu
just here,
just here
buddhya,
buddhya
by intelligence,
by intelligence
yuktah,
yuktaha
dovetailed,
dovetailed
yaya,
yaya
by which,
by which
partha,
partha
O son of Pritha,
o son of Pritha
karma bandham,
karma bandham
bondage of reaction,
bondage of reaction
prahasyasi,
prahasasi
you can be released from.
you
you
can
can
be
be
released
released from.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Translation. Thus far, I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, When you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. Purport. According to Nirukti or the Vedic dictionary, Sankhya means that which describes things in detail, and Sankhya refers to that philosophy which describes the real nature of the soul, and yoga involves controlling the senses. Arjuna's proposal not to fight was based on sense gratification. Forgetting his prime duty, he wanted to cease fighting because he thought that by not killing his relatives and kinsmen, he would be happier than by enjoying the kingdom after conquering his cousins and brothers, the sons of Dhritarashtra. In both ways, the basic principles were for sense gratification. Happiness derived from conquering them and happiness derived by seeing kinsmen alive are both on the basis of personal sense gratification, even at a sacrifice of wisdom and duty. Krishna therefore wanted to explain to Arjun that by killing the body of his grandfather, he would not be killing the soul proper, and he explained that all individual persons, including the Lord himself, are eternal individuals. They were individuals in the past, they are individuals in the present, and they will continue to remain individuals in the future because all of us are individual souls eternally. We simply change our bodily dress in different manners, but actually we keep our individuality even after liberation from the bondage of material dress. An analytical study of the soul and the body has been very graphically explained by Lord Krishna. And this descriptive knowledge of the soul and the body from different angles of vision has been described here as Sankhya in terms of the Nirukti dictionary. This Sankhya has nothing to do with the Sankhya philosophy of the atheist Kapil. Long before the impostor Kapila's Sankhya, the Sankhya philosophy was expounded in the Srimad Bhagavatam by the true Lord Kapil, the incarnation of Lord Krishna, who explained it to his mother Devahuti. It is clearly explained by him that the Purusha or the Supreme Lord is active and that he creates by looking over the Prakriti. This is accepted in the Vedas and in the Gita. The description in the Vedas indicates that the Lord glanced over the Prakriti or nature and impregnated it with atomic individual souls. All these individuals are working in the material world for sense gratification, and under the spell of material energy, they are thinking of being enjoyers. This mentality is dragged to the last point of liberation when the living entity wants to become one with the Lord. This is the last snare of Maya or sense gratificatory illusion, and it is only after many births of such sense gratificatory activities that a great soul surrenders unto Vasudev, Lord Krishna, therefore fulfilling the search after the ultimate truth. Arjun has already accepted Krishna as his spiritual master by surrendering himself unto him. Shishyasteham shadhimam tvam prapannam. Consequently, Krishna will now tell him about the working process in Buddhi Yoga or Karma Yoga, or in other words, the practice of devotional service only for the sense gratification of the Lord. This Buddhi Yoga is clearly explained in chapter 10, verse 10, as being direct communion with the Lord, who is sitting as Paramatma in everyone's heart. But such communion does not take place without devotional service. One who is therefore situated in devotional or loving service to the Lord, or in other words, in Krishna consciousness, attains to this stage of Buddhi Yoga by the special grace of the Lord. The Lord says, therefore, that only to those who are always engaged in devotional service out of transcendental love does he award the pure knowledge of devotion and love. In that way, the devotee can reach him easily in the ever blissful kingdom of God. Thus, the Buddhi Yoga mentioned in this verse is the devotional service of the Lord, and the word Sankhya mentioned herein has nothing to do with the atheistic Sankhya Yoga enunciated by the impostor Kapil. One should not therefore misunderstand that the Sankhya Yoga mentioned herein has any connection with the atheistic Sankhya, nor did that philosophy ever have any influence during that time, nor would Lord Krishna care to mention such godless philosophical speculations. Real Sankhya philosophy is described by Lord Kapil in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but even that Sankhya has nothing to do with the current topics. Here Sankhya means analytical description of the body and the soul. Lord Krishna made an analytical description of the soul just to bring Arjun to the platform of Buddhi Yoga or Bhakti Yoga. Therefore, Lord Krishna's Sankhya and Lord Kapila's Sankhya, as described in the Bhagavatam, are one and the same. They are all Bhakti Yoga. Lord Krishna said, therefore, that only the less intelligent class of men make a distinction between Sankhya Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. Sankhya Yogau prathak balaha pravadanti na panditaha. Of course, atheistic Sankhya Yoga has nothing to do with Bhakti Yoga. Yet the unintelligent claim that the atheistic Sankhya Yoga is referred to in the Bhagavad Gita. One should therefore understand that Buddhi Yoga means to work in Krishna consciousness, in the full bliss and knowledge of devotional service. One who works for the satisfaction of the Lord only, however difficult such work may be, is working under the principles of Buddhi Yoga and finds himself always in transcendental bliss. By such transcendental engagement, one achieves all transcendental understanding automatically by the grace of the Lord, and thus his liberation is complete in itself without his making extraneous endeavors to acquire knowledge. There is much difference between work in Krishna consciousness and work for fruitive results, especially in the matter of sense gratification, for achieving results in terms of family or material happiness. Buddhi Yoga is therefore the transcendental quality of the work that we perform. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Visthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisheshunyavadi Paschadeshtarine. I will just read the translation once again. Thus far, I have described this knowledge to you through analytical study. Now listen as I explain it in terms of working without fruitive results. O son of Pritha, when you act in such knowledge, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. So quite a long purport here by Srila Prabhupada, right? And he uses some pretty strong language, particularly about atheistic couple, right? So there are two couples. One is Kapil Dev, whose mention comes in Srimad Bhagavatam, and he's, as Prabhupada mentions here, he is an incarnation of Krishna. And he teaches the true Sankhya philosophy to Mother Devahuti, which is also nothing but basically Krishna consciousness or the devotional service. But there is another couple who has preached some kind of an atheistic philosophy. And as has been with the case with Bhagavad Gita, and I mean, that's pretty much the case with anything that is popular, right? People try to utilize it for their own gains, right? So the same could be said about Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is one of the most popular Vedic scriptures. So therefore, many people try to misinterpret Bhagavad Gita, and they try to basically use it to propagate their own kind of a philosophy, right? So Prabhupada is basically trying to defeat all such objectives by very clearly delineating or describing Sankhya Yoga, as the word Sankhya has been used here, right? So describing that as the Sankhya Yoga of Kapil Dev, which is nothing but the devotional service of the Lord. Because Krishna can never preach atheistic philosophy, right? So one should not be confused. And, you know, Prabhupada is mentioning a lot of things here, right? So first of all, we have to understand the Sankhya philosophy. So initially Krishna, when Arjun, basically he is in the middle of the battle, as we know, right? And he looks at all of his family, his relatives, his teachers standing on the other side, and he has to fight with them, right? And he gets nervous, and that's the basic background, you know, on which the Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Lord Krishna, to basically convince Arjun that the right thing for him to do was to fight the war, right? And as part of that process, Krishna first of all tries to bring Arjun through the transcendental platform to make him understand that he's actually not the body, but he's the soul. Because the argument that he's giving, right, he basically says that, look, if I fight this war, and let's say I win the war, in that case, I will get the kingdom, right? But if I do not have my family members, if I do not have my teachers, if I do not have my family, my brothers, then what's the point of earning all of this material wealth, right? Because I won't be able to enjoy all of that wealth, right? And if I get defeated, right, and then in that case it's a defeat, right? It's bad in any case. So both of these arguments are primarily based on the bodily concept of life, right? It's basically born out of the idea that I am the enjoyer. It's born out of that idea that the objective of the war was so that the outcome of the war could be enjoyed by Arjun, right? So both of those arguments that Arjun is giving are based on that pretext. So therefore, Krishna, what he does is he tries to bring Arjun to the platform away from the body and basically to the understanding that we are not this body, but we are the soul, right? Na jayate mriyate va kadachin, nayam bhutva bhavita vana bhuya, ajo nityo shashvato yam purano, na hanyate hanyamane sharire, right? So he tries to explain to Arjun that, look, although you seem to be talking a lot of sense, but actually you're talking nonsense, right? Because you are talking from a bodily concept of life and you are not the body, but you are an eternal soul. So you should not think that the objective of the war is actually sense gratification, right? So that's not very intelligent. So he tries to give that logic, and then he also at one point argues that even if you think that this is that you are a body and all of them, they are also the body, then even in that case, the body has to eventually die, right? If not today, then maybe tomorrow, maybe after 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, right? No matter what. The fact of the matter is, if you think that all of these individuals, they are not soul, they are the body, even in that case, they eventually have to die. So why don't they die today? Because if they die today, eventually the religious principles will be protected, right? So it's worthy for them to die today rather than they cause so much of problems in the society, and so that people are not able to practice Krishna consciousness. Instead of that, because you are a Kshatriya, you are duty bound to protect the religious principles. So whether you understand the fact that all of these individuals are not the body but the soul, or you do not understand the idea and you think that they are the body, in both the cases, it makes sense for you to fight, right? So this kind of an argument is basically what is described as Sankhya, right? Sankhya means that which describes things in details, right? So he's basically trying to present that argument. So that's initially what Krishna tried, right? And now he's moving to the next, basically the next way of explaining, which is known as Karma Yoga. But as we see, Prabhupada very nicely, and in fact, in a very, very nice way, being an erudite scholar of the Vedic philosophy and of Krishna consciousness, he basically proves that whether it is Karma Yoga or the term Buddhi Yoga that has been used here, right? It eventually it means devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, right? So basically, some people understand the meaning of Karma Yoga to be that you just do your work and do not worry about the results, right? That's where they stop. They do not say anything about engaging or doing that or surrendering the results of that work for the service of the Lord. They do not even bring Krishna or God into it. They simply argue that Karma Yoga means we should simply work without expecting any results, right? But if you think about it, that does not make any sense, right? Because if you simply work, there has to be some objective. That's how we are programmed. Whatever we do, we first of all think about what are we going to achieve out of it, right? That's how we are programmed. So whatever action we are doing, because we are not machines, right? Machines act why? Because if you run a current across a machine, across a mechanical machine, if you put the right kind of a situation, there is a movement of electrons around that machine will work, right? It doesn't really have any reason. As long as the electricity is running through that machine, that's a mechanical machine, and it will run, right? But the living entities are different. The living entities, we have our own free will, right? So whatever actions we perform, there is always an objective associated with it. So it is very impractical to think that we can just work without thinking about the results, right? What is actually recommended is that we should act in a way that that action becomes yoga, right? So Krishna basically says, Niyatam kuru karma tvam, karm jayo hi akarmana, sharir yatra pichatena, prasiddhyet akarmana. So Krishna basically is saying that based on your propensities, right, whatever propensity you may have, niyatam, kuru karma tvam, you have to perform your duty, you have to perform action. Even if a person decides to go to the forest, right, even there he has to perform, engage in some kind of an action. He will have to create a hut, he will have to basically eat something, whatever it may be, right? And even if he's sitting under a tree, even at that point, it's not just easy to give up action, right? His mind will always be busy in thinking, right? And in fact, some people argue that why did Krishna encourage Arjun to fight, right? If he wanted to go to the forest, and Arjun himself basically asked this question, right? But the whole point was, even if Arjun goes to the forest, he will be thinking about fighting, because that's his prarabdha, that's his niyatam, right? As Krishna mentions this words niyatam. So that is his basic propensity. He is a Kshatriya by his propensity, right? So for a Kshatriya, he is basically naturally a fighter, right? And it is his natural propensity to fight. So Krishna is basically saying that, look, if you artificially give up fighting the war and you go to the forest, because of your previous karmas, because of your natural propensity, you will still be thinking about the war. So that giving up, that is artificial. Basically, it's a way of artificially giving up action, and that is the most foolish thing for anyone to do. Because if he does that, he will, of course, Krishna gives the argument that you will gain nothing but infamy. People will say that, oh, Arjun, he used to call himself like a big fighter, but he actually ran away from the war, right? And that will bring a lot of infamy, not just to you, but even to your ancestors, right? Because you belong to such a prestigious clan. And if you do that, that will bring nothing but infamy. And even, it would have served some purpose if by doing that you could attain the ultimate perfection. But even that is not going to happen, because even after you go to the forest, you will only be thinking about the war, right? So instead of that, Krishna suggests Arjuna to engage in the fight, right? To engage in the fight for protecting the religious principles, because by doing that, he will be making Krishna happy. So that is the ultimate objective. The ultimate objective is to work for the satisfaction of the Lord, right? And that is basically the definition of the devotional service. And Prabhupada here is giving the argument that that is also the definition of karma yoga, right? Because it is a very, very foolish argument to say to a person that you simply work and do not care about the results, because it's totally impractical, because a person is not a machine. And that is the basic difference, one of the basic differences between Parashakti and the Aparashakti of the Lord. We are the superior energy of Krishna, and the material energy of the Krishna, which is the inferior energy of Krishna. It does not have a free will, right? So with the material energy of Krishna, for example, the example that I gave of a machine, you can expect that it will simply work if you run current across it, right? Without expecting what that movement will cause, whether that movement will create good results or bad results. It does not care. It simply works as long as the energy is running through it, right? But human beings or the living entities are not like that. They are always acting. The desire is to attain some results out of that action, right? So what's the idea behind karma yoga, right? The idea is actually bhakti yoga, that those actions, whatever we do, they should be done for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. And when we do that, because we are not doing it for our own sense engagement, but we are doing it for the pleasure of the Lord, what will eventually happen is that our attachment towards the Supreme Lord will increase, and our attachment towards sense gratification will decrease. And that's the whole game, basically, right? If we look at our current situation, the root of the problem is that we are engaged in the service of the material energy of Krishna instead of being engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord. Our natural state our dharma, swadharma, what we call swadharma, right? Swadharma means natural propensity, just like the swadharma of fire is to give out heat and light. Similarly, it is our natural propensity to serve, right? Now, the question is whether we serve the material energy of the Lord out of illusion, or we serve the Supreme Lord himself, right? So that makes the entire difference. There is no way that we can give up the work. So that's what Krishna is saying. Niyatam kuru karma tvam karma jayo hi akarmana sharir yatra pichatena prasiddhyata karmana. If a person does not work, he cannot even maintain this body. What to talk about anything else, right? But how should you act is the question, right? So Krishna says, Yagnarthat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tad artham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. Yagnarthat. So basically Krishna says you have to work as if you're performing a yagya. So action should be performed like a yagya. And what is yagya? Anything that is done for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suhridam sarva bhutanam gyatva mam shantiricchati, Krishna says. So I am the beneficiary of all of the yagyas. Bhoktaram yagya tapasam. All the austerities and the yagyas that are done by the living entities, I am the ultimate beneficiary, right? So if you turn this logic around, anything that is done to serve Krishna or to benefit Krishna basically is called yagya, right? So as long as we perform action for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, it is called karma yoga. That is the real definition of karma yoga. And that is also the definition of the devotional service of the Lord, right? So the ultimate path to achieve perfection is by engaging the devotional service of the Lord. And there are no two ways about it. And even Krishna is very, very clear in Bhagavad Gita about it, right? Devihi esha gunmayi mam maya duratya mam evahi prapadyante maya mitam tarantite, Krishna says, right? That to cross over this material nature of mine is extremely difficult. Duratya means it's extremely difficult. Mam evahi prapadyante, only by surrendering unto me, no one else but just me. Mam eva hi prapadyante maya metam tarantite. One can cross over this material energy of mine, right? There is no other way. Even though a person, he may foolishly think, as Prabhupada here also indicates, right, that the last snare of Maya is to think that I will lose my individuality and I will merge into the Supreme, right? I will basically, Brahma will merge with the Parabrahma, right? And many people, they kind of misunderstand some of these things that have been described in the Vedas, right? Like Soham, I am the same as him, right? And many scholars, many so-called scholars, they confuse the idea that, ultimately we will lose our individuality. But as Prabhupada very rightly points out here, at no point our individuality vanishes, right? We are different individuals and Krishna is a separate individual, right? We never lose our own identity. It's not like we will merge into the existence of the Supreme Lord and our identity will be gone. It is never the case. That is the last snare of Maya. And why is it the last snare? Because ultimately that's what they want. They want to be Krishna himself, right? That's why we are all struggling in this material world, because we are envious of the Supreme Lord. We foolishly think that, let us be the controllers instead of Krishna being the supreme controller, because he is the supreme controller. Maya dhakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetu nanena kaunteya jagat viparivartate, right? So under my command, all of these worlds are coming into existence and going back into, getting destroyed, right? Maya dhakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam. So it's under my leadership that Maya Shakti of mine is running the show, basically. So Krishna, he is the supreme controller. But we as the living part and parcels of the Supreme Lord, when we get envious of the Supreme Lord and we think that we want to be the controllers, we are put into this material world. And it's not that Krishna is forcing us to be in the material world, right? It is because it is our desire to enjoy independent of the Supreme Lord. And as long as we have the desire to enjoy independently of the Supreme Lord, Krishna has made all the kind of arrangements for us to facilitate, to see, to make sure that we can find some enjoyment independent of Krishna, right? And that's what we have been trying to do for birth after birth. We are always trying to become happy by engaging in the three modes of material nature in all the different ways. And eventually when a person, a jivatma, gets tired of it, and by the arrangement, by mercy of the saints and Krishna, he finds a guru. Brahman Brahmite Kono Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasade Paye Bhakti Lata Bij. After roaming many times in the 8.4 million species of life, one fortunate soul, when he makes Krishna and the Guru happy, he gets the seed of Bhakti Yoga, of the devotional service of the Lord. It's very rare. It's not easy, right? So by their mercy, when we find the devotional service of the Lord and we engage in the devotional service of the Lord, right, according to the prescribed rules and regulations, based on the prescription, just like, when we are diseased, right? If you're suffering from a disease, doctor prescribes us some medicines, right? It tells us, you have to take this medicine, and then these are the things, these are the food items that you should avoid, these are the things that you should eat, right? So there is a list of things that one should do, and there is a list of other things that one should not do, right? So similarly, in Bhakti Yoga and the devotional service of the Lord, the Guru gives that list, right? And when a devotee starts to follow that, right, sincerely, and makes a sincere effort, eventually by following the process, there are different stages of Bhakti Yoga, right? Gradually he climbs from one step to the next step, right? But what is important is sincerity. And eventually with that sincerity, ultimately the success really depends upon mercy, right? As long as we are sincerely attached to following the instructions of the spiritual master, as long as we are sincere towards that, the mercy automatically comes through the sampradaya, right? So as long as we are sincerely following the instructions as have been prescribed for us by our Guru, particularly by the spiritual master, gradually the purification process takes place, right? So the first stage is Ado Shraddha. That's where everything starts. Whether it is whether you go to study in a school, or you want to start with a spiritual life, without that little bit of a faith, nothing can work, right? So skepticism is not really good, right? Usually people who have done a lot of misdeeds in their previous lives, it is very difficult for them to develop even that little bit of a faith. Krishna says people who still have a lot of baggage of their misdeeds, it is very difficult for them to engage in the service of the Supreme Lord, or to basically engage sincerely in the devotional service. Only the people whose past misdeeds have been totally eradicated, only they are able to sincerely engage in the loving devotional service of the Lord. So otherwise what happens is, it's very difficult for us to develop even a little bit of a faith to pick up the devotional service. And without that little bit of a faith, we cannot become Krishna conscious. We cannot even start the journey, right? So it starts with a little bit of a faith. And as long as a person has a little bit of that faith, Ado Shraddha, and he's able to find the association of the devotees, right? Sadhu Sangha, that's the next step. Then the bhajan kriya starts. Then the process of engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, it starts, right? So first of all, it starts at an external level, right? We just, try to engage in some way or the other. We are just trying to chant physically our rounds. Sometimes they happen, sometimes they do not happen. And similarly, we are trying to follow the regulative principles. We are breaking a few, we are meeting some, right? So gradually that bhajan kriya process, when it starts, then gradually anartha nivritti takes place, right? So anarthas means all of the previous activities that we have done. Because of those previous activities, there are certain propensities, particularly the desire to enjoy material nature, right? That is the main problem, right? So because of our previous prarabdhas, there is a very strong desire for us to enjoy the material nature, right? Some people enjoy the mode of ignorance, some people enjoy more the mode of passion, some people enjoy more in terms of the mode of goodness, right? And it could be a mix of all these three based on our previous prarabdhas. So when we start bhajan kriya, gradually cheto darpan marjanam, as Mahaprabhu describes, right? So that process gradually takes place, which results in anartha nivritti. And once that anartha nivritti process reaches to a certain stage, once most of the anarthas have been removed or cleansed from our heart, right? Then the next step, nishtha, takes place, right? Then we develop a strong faith towards the devotional service, right? Then that conviction that eventually serving the Supreme Lord is the ultimate good, that stage gradually arrives, right? After anartha nivritti, that nishtha stage arrives, and after nishtha, gradually then we move to the next stage, right? So that stage is called ruchi. When the ruchi stage comes, at that point, just like at this point we find more interest in performing our day-to-day material activities, at the stage of ruchi, gradually what happens is we find more taste in serving or engaging in the services of the Supreme Lord, right? So once that stage comes, then we can move on to the next stage of asakti. So asakti means we are then more attached towards serving the Supreme Lord than we are attached towards our day-to-day activities, right? And after that stage, that's also a very, very elevated stage. Usually what happens is we are pretty much stuck in the stage of anartha nivritti and ruchi, right? So there is a back and forth that's going on. And that's because we are not ready to give up our association, with the material nature. The way we are performing our actions, and we have so many fruitive desires. Although the process of bhakti is taking place, although we are chanting, but while we are chanting, the anartha nivritti is taking place, there is some amount of detachment that is also coming, but we kind of force ourselves, we kind of knowingly attach ourselves to the material nature, right? To enjoying the material nature, right? So usually we basically just, move back and forth, like a pendulum between this stage. So that's where we have to be very, very careful, right? And for that, we have to apply all kinds of formula, right? The most important one is to remain in the association of the devotees. Association is the most important, right? Sangat sanjayate kama, kama krodha vijayate, Krishna says. So wherever we focus our attention, whatever kind of association we have, so the more we focus upon the objects of sense gratification, that causes kama into our hearts, the propensity to enjoy those objects of sense gratification through our senses. It stays very, very strong, right? So we have to engage ourselves with people who find taste in practicing Krishna consciousness, right? And when we stay in such a company, gradually our focus will shift from enjoying the material nature, from the objects of sense gratification, towards serving the Supreme Lord, right? So association is very, very important. Association plus trying to act in Krishna consciousness, right? So instead of focusing our mind too much upon material gains, we have to somehow tailor our lifestyle in such a way that we can act in Krishna consciousness for the pleasure of the Lord, right? Not paying too much attention towards the material sense gratification, right? One example is just like a nurse, right? When a nurse, she's serving the patients, so she sees, this patient, he's getting serious. So she immediately is running from one room to the other room, taking care of multiple patients, and she finds, this particular patient is in a critical situation. She immediately gives a call to the doctor. Oh, doctor, this particular patient is very, very critical. You have to come immediately. But at the same time, she looks at the watch and it's like, it's 4:45. My shift is about to end, right? So she is not at all attached to that patient. She is basically attending to that patient just as a matter of duty. And as soon as the clock strikes 5, her shift changes. Another nurse takes over. And at 5:15, it turns out that the patient has died, right? That news of the death of that patient does not impact the nurse one bit, right? Because she sees that day in and day out. And her engagement in her duties towards caring for that patient is simply out of, as a sense of duty, basically. That's pretty much it. She is not identifying herself that that patient belongs to her, right? That sense is not there. Of course, it would be different if that patient is related to her, right? Because that relationship would bring the sense of belonging, that this is mine, right? Mamatva, what is called in Sanskrit mamatva or mamata, right? Mamata means, what's the meaning of the word mamata? Mamata's real meaning is this is mine, right? So that feeling that this body is mine and everyone and anything associated with the body is mine, that is the root cause, right? As long as we identify with those things as to be our own, that causes bondage to this material world. And as soon as that feeling shifts from these material engagements to identifying that only Krishna is someone who belongs to me and I belong to Krishna, right? So gradually when the consciousness shifts from that stage to this stage, that's when we can move to the higher stages of bhakti, right? Ruchi, bhav, and prem. Ruchi, asakti, bhav, and prem, right? Eventually, satatam kirtayantu mam, that stage where we are constantly 24/7 engaged in the loving devotional service of the Lord. At that stage, Krishna finally awards the prema bhakti, right? So that stage eventually comes by practice. Abhyasena tu konteya vairagyena cha grihate, right? So we have to constantly practice by hook or crook, no matter how we do it, as long as we are able to do it, right? And the most potent way is to always associate with the devotees of Krishna, right? And the other important fact is we have to somehow tailor our lifestyle in such a way that we do not identify our sense of pleasure with our day-to-day material activities. We have to somehow relate our day-to-day material activities with the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, right? No matter how we do it, as they say, fake it if you cannot make it, right? Even if we have to fake it for some time, the idea is we have to somehow tailor our lifestyle in such a way that 24/7 we can somehow or the other associate all of our actions with the service of the Supreme Lord, right? And when we do that, if we make a sincere effort gradually with practice and through surrender, eventually, we can progress through those 9 stages of bhakti, right? And ultimately what really works is prema bhakti cannot simply be attained by our own effort. It can only be attained by the mercy of someone who has already attained prema bhakti. That is a fact, right? And we are very, very fortunate that we belong to this sampradaya, to such a divine disciplic succession where Mahaprabhu himself came, right? So it's very, very potent. And as long as we give it our best shot, we try our level best, we can rest assured that the mercy will be provided, right? As Prabhupada used to say, that we just hold my dhoti and I will take you back home, back to Godhead, right? But we have to be qualified to hold Prabhupada's dhoti, right? It's not for everyone. It's easier said than done, right? We have to have that level of surrender. You cannot just catch hold to someone who you do not trust completely, right? So we have to come to at least a stage where we have a firm conviction that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although I may not have that understanding completely and I may not be constantly engaged in the loving service of the Lord, but there should be a strong hankering to achieve that stage, right? And the strength of that hankering eventually can take a devotee to that stage ultimately. So it's 7:46. I will stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Any questions or comments, anyone?
Very nice, Prabhu. You taught about the nurse and all that. That's very nice. Very nice explanation.
Thank you, Mataji. Yeah, one other example I really like, to describe how we are attached to this material world. I actually recently came across it is, there is a juggler, a madari as we call in Hindi, right? So he basically captures a monkey and then he engages that monkey in entertaining the people, right? So there is a trick that he uses to catch hold of that monkey, right? So what he does is he basically takes a pot and makes it very heavy at the bottom, and it has a very slender and long neck, and he puts sweets inside it, like something, right? And when the monkey smells it, he puts his hand inside that pot and he catches hold makes a fist, right, and he catches hold of that sweet, and because the size of his fist is bigger than the circumference of the neck of that pot, he is not able to get his hand out of it, right? There is no rope that is tying his hand to that pot. But because he is not ready to let go of the sweet, right, he has bound himself to that pot, and eventually he's captured by that Madari or the juggler, right? So similarly, there is actually no rope that is binding us to this material world, right? As someone, once there is a lecture where someone asks Prabhupada that, how much time does it take for one to go back to Godhead? And Krishna and Prabhupada says 1 minute, right? So, and it's a fact. Basically, all we have to do, all that monkey has to do is he has to let go of that sweet. But because of his strong desire to enjoy that sweet, that laddu, he basically is bound to that pot and eventually gets captured by the Madari, right? So similarly, because we have a very, very strong desire to enjoy independent of Krishna, because we want to enjoy this material nature, that desire itself is the binding force that is keeping us bound to this material world. And as soon as we let go of the desire, we can immediately be freed from the bondage of this material world and immediately be engaged in the loving service of the Lord, right? But that's the most tricky part. It's very difficult for us to let go, right? But if someone by mercy or through his own effort, and eventually by the combination of both, if someone is able to let go and surrender unto the Supreme Lord, yeah, sarva dharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tam sarva papebhyo mokshashami ma sucha, right? So Krishna is basically saying, you just surrender unto me, right? But to surrender is the most difficult thing, right? That's what takes all of the effort. In fact, our entire Krishna conscious, the practice that we are currently doing is so that we can eventually surrender, right? Because it is very difficult for us to let go. But if someone can let go, it's an instantaneous process. One can immediately be freed from the bondage and be situated in the loving service of the Supreme Lord. So in one way, if you look at it, it's very, very simple. But that simple thing is the most complicated thing as well, right? Because it is very difficult for us to surrender. So thank you, Janvarani Mataji, for that. Anyone else has any comments or questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Nice class, Prabhuji. Maybe, I don't know whether you already covered this. I joined a little late. So Prabhuji, question is, let's say when we are preaching, and how do we explain the difference between selfless philanthropic work compared to devotional service, that is work done in devotion with example? So I don't know whether you already covered that, Prabhuji. Sorry.
No, actually I did not, and that's a good point, Prabhuji. Thank you for bringing that up, because especially when we go out preaching, right, many people give this logic that instead of engaging in the devotional service, instead of donating to a temple, why don't you make hospitals, right? That's one of the most common logics that come, right? And the question is, how do you kind of defeat that argument, right? So Prabhupada says, not here but in another purport, actually I believe it is in Isha Upanishad or Nectar of Instruction, one of those. Prabhupada says that this idea to create hospitals or to serve our family members or society or the nation, it's basically a form of extended sense gratification, right? So personal sense gratification is basically, I want to basically serve myself, right? But then once a person gets a little more mature, he wants to serve the family, and then eventually the society, and eventually the nation, right? So this is nothing but a form of extended sense gratification, because the idea is, there is always a sense of, we want to gain something out of it, right? And we want to gain something that is material, not transcendental. Whereas if we are providing, if we are serving the real service of of society is to give them this knowledge of Krishna consciousness, right? Because eventually what we are doing is we are suffering. We are all suffering in this material world. Today you may cure a disease of one person, right? But tomorrow he may be struck with some other disease, right? If I make a hospital, right, let's say I'm able to cure some disease that a person has, but what is the guarantee that tomorrow he will not be afflicted with some other disease, right? And if not in this birth, after that person dies, he may take birth again as someone who is even more miserable, maybe as a cat or a dog who is roaming around on the streets, right? So just by making a hospital, we are not ensuring a permanent end to their misery, right? They are all basically temporary fixes. And in most of the time, the motivation is something material. You know, the person who is investing in such endeavors, in such so-called philanthropic endeavors, usually they have their own kind of self gains. You know, most of the time politicians or, you know, some rich businessmen, they also want to gain some limelight so that their businesses can be benefited or their political objectives could be benefited out of it. But even if a person is genuinely basically engaged in so-called philanthropy, one has to understand that this is all a temporary fix. The permanent fix is for us to get out of the cycle of birth and death, right? And that could only be done by preaching Krishna consciousness. It's like if someone is hungry and you provide them with some food for one time, then, you know, you've done something for that particular day, but what about the next day, right? Next day he will again be roaming around hungry. So that's not the solution. The solution is to give Krishna consciousness. So I'm not rejecting the idea that, you know, we should totally disengage ourselves from philanthropy. I'm not saying that. Even Prabhupada used to say that within 100 miles of a temple, no one should go hungry, right? So it is important to take care of the material needs, of course, right? Because without taking care of the body, one cannot even engage in Krishna consciousness. So all of those activities are okay, but we should not foolishly think that they are for the ultimate benefit of the human society. The ultimate benefit of the human society is by understanding how can we get out of the cycle of birth and death so that our miseries can be permanently be cured, right? And that result can only be obtained by providing Krishna consciousness to people.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for asking such a nice question. I mean, I have also myself faced this multiple times, and usually it is difficult to explain to people. So, but someone, you know, there are some people who can understand, but someone who does not even understand what Krishna consciousness is, you know, and there is this, there is one common belief, especially in India, Nar Seva is Narayan Seva, right? People equate Nar Seva with Narayan Seva, which is actually not wrong, but people do not really understand what is the real Nar Seva, right? The difference between a human and an animal is that a human has the ability to engage in Krishna consciousness and get out of the birth and death, the cycle of the birth and death. In every other respect, a human and the animal is the same. There is no difference. The only difference is because he has a higher intellect, a human being has the ability to get out of the circle of birth and death, and that facility is not available as in the animal form, right? So the ultimate Nar Seva is to make that person realize that your ultimate well-being is to practice Krishna consciousness and get out of the cycle of birth and death. And a person who cannot do that, there is a term used for him. It's called Atmadaha. I forget the real term, but the meaning is spiritual suicide, right? The English literal meaning of that term is spiritual suicide. So a human being who, even after becoming, taking the form of the human body, taking this human body, does not engage in transcendental loving service of the Lord or in Krishna consciousness, he is basically committing a spiritual suicide, right? And the real Nar Seva means to save people from committing that human suicide, from that spiritual suicide. As long as we can do that, we are also serving Narayan, right? So in that sense, Nar Seva is Narayan Seva. But people confuse this idea of Nar Seva. They just think these temporary fixes of making a hospital or, distributing food is good enough. I'm not saying that these things should not be done. They should certainly be done. But one should not think that they will provide the ultimate benefit, right? Because food is also available to animals, right? What is so special about providing food to the humans? If even animals can get their food, humans have sufficient amount of intellect and a social culture wherein they can easily obtain the food, right? So that's not the big deal. The more important part is how can we save them from committing that transcendental or the spiritual suicide? How can we ensure that more and more people can be engaged in the loving devotional service of the Lord? So that is my understanding of it, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I think because one example that is in my mind is in India, in Mumbai. So there is a big cancer hospital run by Tata.
Yes.
And patient come there from all over the country because that is very, very affordable. People who cannot go to private hospitals. And then people end up even staying on the road nearby, who cannot even afford to stay in hotel.
Right.
So I was watching one YouTube video where some of like it's not like a big institute, but like people who starts like serving food
Yes.
As a free food. They are not ISKCON, but they do that service for many years. And what I was thinking, I mean, in that specific difficult situation, right, it may be hard to even preach, but at least we can at least start distributing maybe the prasadam, right? That may be the best we can do.
Absolutely. And that's what we do, right? From ISKCON, we have Food for Life, right? We have so many programs where we distribute free meals, right? We basically serve Krishna Prasad, right? So that is basically a much better service, right? That is the true service, in fact. So one example that I usually like is, for example, if we are traveling in an airplane, we are not against making that journey comfortable, right? Of course, if someone is trying to make the journey comfortable, that's of course preferred. Why not, right? If we can make the overall journey comfortable, if we can move a person from economy to the business, why not, right? But if that leads for us to forget that we have to get down at our destination, then that improvement in our journey experience is of no use, right? Whereas if a person is maybe a little bit uncomfortable while traveling on the plane, but eventually if he's able to get down at the destination, that's what really matters. We have to reach safe and sound to our destination, right? So we are not against making the journey comfortable, but what we put more importance to is the fact that we have to recall that when the death comes, when the time comes, we know what needs to be done. We know that we have to get down off that plane and get to our home. And if we cannot remind people about that, if they just want to stay in that plane forever, that will be a huge misfortune, right? So we are not against making the journey comfortable, but at the same time, we want to highlight the fact that eventually what matters is for us to be able to safely reach home.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. So with that thought, I think we will end here. Do we have Rasraj Prabhu? Do we have poll today? No, I don't think he has joined the call today. Okay, so in that case, we will pay obeisances to all the Vaishnavas. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa
सिन्धुभ्येव च
patitanam pavanebhyo
वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अभिराम प्रभु की जय।
Hare Krishna. Thank you all so much.